Welcome to Redbeard Radio. I'm Brian Keith, and today we're talking about a problem we all face, which is when to rest. How do you know when you actually need to rest versus when you're being lazy? I've been coaching entrepreneurs since 2012, and it is an infinite number of times that I've talked with people where I talk with a lot of high performers, and people come to a place of just being burnt out and feeling like they should take a rest, but then feeling guilty about not working as hard as humanly possible. People who work early mornings, late nights, all through the weekends feel bad about missing their kids. They don't know when to rest. And as soon as they start to rest, they feel bad about it. Maybe non-high performers have the same problem. I don't know. I see it a lot in the people who are running the big companies that you're like, oh, I want to be like that person. Let me tell you, that person has a troubled relationship with when to go take a break. Here to help us dive into this topic, we have Carla Fowler of THAXA Executive Coaching Company. And Carla is an MD and a PhD and is going to help us dive into this. And by the end of this episode, you're going to have a better idea of when you're just being lazy and you should keep on pushing versus when you actually need to take a rest in order to take care of yourself and over the long term have the highest level of performance. Carla, welcome to Redbeard Radio.
Brian, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this topic.
It's going to be fun, and it's one on my mind a lot right now as I am remodeling a room in my house. And at the same time as running the business, at the same time as having the garden to go weed, at the same time as getting out on the sailboat, et cetera, et cetera. And I think about this a lot, where I think, am I being lazy or am I intelligently resting up? And what is rest? Is watching, like last night, I get tired enough that I don't really want to read a book because I can't really focus. And the books I'm reading are all books that require intense amounts of focus. So I put something on to watch on the laptop. And right now I'm watching sailing videos of this couple I enjoy, and they just finished sailing Vancouver Island. And this is back from 2019, but it's so much fun, Carla. And I think, okay, I think that was a good way to rest between the end of production, which I stopped producing around 9 p.m. I think I stopped working at 9 p.m. last night, in this case on remodel. And then I, watched videos for half an hour and then went to bed. Is that good? Or is actually there a better way? This rest problem shows up every night of what do you do when you're too tired to keep on producing without making a lot of mistakes and you go to bed. But it also shows up during the day. If you have 15 minutes between calls, ought you to go for a walk, lift weights, go make as much progress in 15 minutes as you can on the next project you're doing for work. Go give your wife a hug, go have a snack, and we don't know anymore. What do you think?
Well, I think that it has different answers for different people at different moments in time. And so that's kind of a lame consulting answer.
I was going to say, I want you to just tell us, without knowing anything about all the people listening to the show, just tell us, like, how do we even decide? Ought I, after this interview, should I lift weights, go for a walk, mow my lawn, work on my remodel project, write an email for a client? What should I do? How can I know?
So the second piece of that thought after the first initial lame consulting answer is this idea of asking yourself, where is my energy at right now? But also, I like to ask myself, where do I think my energy has been at like past 2 weeks? So you're kind of looking, the moment right now matters, like how you're feeling about it. But often there's a lot of different stuff that can kind of influence how you're feeling right at this moment. Like, for example, if I just got an email back from like a client who had a totally big win and I'm feeling like an awesome coach, like I feel kind of energized, right? Which may be totally separate from the fact that I didn't get enough sleep last night, just as a hypothetical example.
Hypothetical, big quote marks right there, folks.
Yeah.
Who got enough sleep last night? Good for you. Here's a cookie.
Yeah. I think the other thing can sometimes be that you need to pay attention to not just what's happening right now, but what is your assessment of sort of how has your energy been and how balanced in sort of the things that matter to you have you been over maybe a longer period of time than just right at this moment. I think generally speaking, you could do any number of those things right at that moment and it would be fine. And I think people often overanalyze at that level of granularity while missing the bigger overarching picture of how is my general balance of things that are really important to me and my investment in the processes that are going to get me there. And to actually be able to do that, we have to have some clarity about it. And so I think that's what makes your question a challenging one. And not because I don't want to give it an answer, but because the way I actually approach this with people is that we have to get some clarity about what are the things in your life and work that you want to be making progress on that really matter to you. Not, the millions of sort of different dreams we might have, but when it really comes down to it and you are brutally focused about it, what floats to the top of that pile? Or even, let's not say float, what do you intentionally put at the top of the pile? And so you listed a couple different things I'll just point out. So clearly, like some physical activity is important to you. Getting out on your sailing boat's important. I think you said you've got a remodel going, the important relationships in your life. Then there's your work.
We have a long, proud tradition on this podcast of using me with embarrassing examples that are way too personal, but it gets the point home. So here, Carla, is my life right now. Last year, we lost my daughter just before she was born, and I never got to complete the nursery.
Yeah.
Because she died.
Yeah.
And that used to be my office. And I built my new office, which was always the plan, which I'm in now. But I never finished. I never really started the remodel on the old nursery. Well, finally decided, okay, it's time. So that's been the last 2 weeks of my life is whenever it's a slight exaggeration to say, whenever I'm not at my desk, I'm remodeling this room and painting it and adding in all the details that my wife wants and making it just right.
Yeah.
So what I feel like I need, if I look, you said 2 weeks as a time frame to consider. If I look at the last 2 weeks and I say, what do I actually need? The answer is quite obvious. I need a day on which I'm not in technology whatsoever and on which I go for a long walk. If I just did that, even for one day, but ideally for 2 days in a row, while eating healthy, good food, and probably I'd go to the gym and weightlift a little bit. I have not actually been to the gym in 2 weeks since I started this remodel. So just every available ounce of energy is going towards building or work. That's it. So that's what I need. But then I look at my schedule and that's not what's in my schedule. And a lot of people I talk to are in something of a similar boat. If you just say, what do you need? There's one answer. And then if you say, what are you going to do? There's a different answer. And sometimes there's a really big gap between the two.
Yes. Okay. This is a great topic you've brought up. And by the way, thank you. You are being a very graceful example on your own podcast. So when I think about that gap, and this is true for many people, there's a couple of things that I recommend, or just principles to keep in mind. One is that while we can design these like beautiful, perfect, schedules and days in our minds, that the process of actually translating those into reality doesn't have to be a downer if we frame it as, this is how I actually live my dream. It doesn't mean that the dream ever looks exactly like it looks in your head, like that perfect schedule, because by the nature of what goes on in our head, which is fantasy, it never has to obey the 24 hours in a day. But the process of translating the idea of what we think we want or what we really need into reality, even if it gets changed and reshaped as it goes through that process, that is literally how we live amazing lives. That is how we live real lives. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this idea of, I call it have some good now. And what I mean is sometimes there are things that don't feel like imperatives, but feel they are important, right? Like that time to be logged off electronics and maybe be out walking. And maybe the reality of actually getting 2 full days of that every week doesn't fit with some of the other imperatives you have, right? Like the importance of getting that room remodeled and both like what are the meanings that are held with that and just the importance of that to you and your family. And also just the fact that like generally we need to be working unless we have something else worked out. And there's some imperatives around that. But the idea of have some good now is the idea of just because you can't block maybe 2 whole days at this moment, I always encourage people to start the process of have some. Even if you can't have it all, you don't feel like you can have it all right now, have some. And so that might be that you pick one morning a week where you do half a day and then you log on for your second half. But you really block the time and start that process of protecting it. And as you find more time, maybe you continue to add to that. But if it's really hard to make the big jump if we haven't kind of incrementally started to make the jump of blocking half a day and figuring out how we make that actually work within our schedule and the other things that are really important to us also.
My schedule is Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm on the phone all day. And then Mondays, I record podcasts once or twice a month. And then typically Wednesdays and Fridays, I don't do any calls. And so I have, well, tomorrow on Tuesday, I'll be on the phone for 6 or 8 hours. I know that on Wednesday, this particular week, I have a single call, but in general, I have 0 calls on Wednesdays. So it gives me this chance to breathe and to push really hard in this one area of what I do. But then on Wednesday, I can go build stuff. I can go be more active in Slack throughout the day with all my various teams.
Yeah.
I can go take a walk when I feel like, because nothing's scheduled. And then also the same thing on Friday. So I have this very intense Tuesday and Thursday every week. And Tuesday's usually more intense than Thursday. So I sort of front load my week. And especially if I'm recording podcasts, I might record 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 podcasts in a day. And I release once a week. So I record usually 1 to 2 months of podcasts in a day, which is pretty intense. And then Tuesday's really long. But over half my time being on the phone is done by the time Tuesday's done for the whole week, every week. And that way I have this way to I can approach the week. And it's not like, on days we have lots of calls on a Friday, if you're a person who works a standard Monday to Friday a week, it's just rough. Because by the time you're waking up on Friday, you're like, oh, I just got to survive today, Carla. I just got to survive. Which is not, for most of us, the best way to show up to work and bring our creative selves